right, good evening. Welcome to the Golden Glory Podcast, a bi-weekly show that focuses on how the player impacts MMOs in areas of crafting, economy, and conquest. We're all about discussing ideas, asking hard-hitting questions, and highlighting interesting aspects in MMOs. Our focus for the foreseeable future is the upcoming MMO from Artcraft Entertainment, Crowfall. This is episode number 2, and we are broadcasting live on Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015. If you weren't expecting to see us until next week, it's because we decided to throw a bonus episode to talk about some of the new information that dropped this past week. Joining us once again from today's cast is Anres.
Hey, everybody.
Mike.
Hello, hello, hello. Great to be here.
And how about Bill?
Hey there, what's going on, everybody?
And of course, I am Franklin, aka Chief Sarkhan. Now we have a whole lot to talk about when it comes to the economy, frequently asked questions, and crafting, but we're going to save that. Most of that for next week's cast, because we want to focus on that exclusively for those subjects. So for today, our first topic is archetypes. As we've now had 2 archetypes, actually now it's 3 archetypes.
3, yeah, we got
3
another
archetypes
one. Yeah,
have been announced.
Fast
We're going to
and
talk
furious
about our
drops.
observations on these.
Oh, wait, a 4th one has just been... No, I'm kidding.
Man,
Don't blink, don't
up
blink.
here. So Crowfall seems to be put both race and class together in an archetype. What are the advantages and disadvantages of merging race and class? And what other games do this? Maybe MOBA style? What do you think, Bill?
Well, yeah, that's a good thought, because what we've seen so far is, with the race and class combo, seems to, I think, for the typical maybe MMO RPG player, seems a little limiting. You know, character customization and character creation are always some of the biggest topics, especially pre-launch. You know, when am I going to be able to, see what kind of character customization I can do, and what are my choices, and is it, race locked or gender locked or any of those kinds of things. And so they've touched on those already. So from a traditional perspective, it might seem a little bit limiting. But then again, I think as we learn more about the type of game Crowfall is, I feel maybe that the focus is definitely on the gameplay and the systems that are going to support that, and maybe it won't matter as much. They're still calling it an MMORPG, so that's going to be important no matter what. But maybe it won't factor in as much. I think. But so it could be a different thing. But I think it might be a little, until they say more. I think some people might be a little bit disappointed in the initial sort of reveal of that.
Interesting. For me, when they start about the archetypes and the race class combinations, I really went back to my roots of RPGs. I was thinking about, how did I roll my first D&D character? It was about, you picked basically your starter, whatever you call it, base class, promotional class, whatever is what they're calling them in Crowfall, and you kind of moved and grew and developed your character into specializations. And as you proceeded through campaigns. And so I see a lot of potential of bringing that kind of background and philosophy into an MMO a little bit more than we've seen traditionally. It's not, you're not rolling a quote-unquote specific class out the gate. Yeah, an archetype is a class, but it seems a little bit more flexible to me. That's my opinion.
Yeah, very true.
I think too, because the idea of combining both the kind of the class and the race together, calling it an archetype. When you play an action role-playing game like a Diablo or Marvel Heroes, it seems very natural and normal. You pick a character, you're that character, you kind of have their abilities. In an MMO, it does seem strange, because the whole idea of an MMO, it's always been done a certain way. You pick your race, and then you pick one of the classes. You pick one of the classes that race can be, but honestly, what I can perceive though is there going to be some people that are going to want to be, say, a centaur, and they're going to want to play Templar or something like that. So I think you're gonna, because it is so normal to have diversity in an MMO. I think you will have people that may have concern about it, but ultimately for me, I think, I think it's a nice change. It definitely can work based on everything I'm seeing. But there's another piece to it too. There's further development into that particular archetype as well. That, from what I understand, will make the game seem a lot different. So as you advance your character, suddenly your class becomes something very different. So I think with the diversity available, I think it works. I just think there are going to be some people that might, lots of forum tiers on the subject of it's too restrictive, and of course we know that some of them are gender locked, some of them aren't. From what I understand, most of the non-human ones are going to be pretty much the same gender. For example, today's Templar archetype reveal showed both male and female, where the Stoneforge and the Centaur were showing, or the Legionnaire I think, were showing single gender. So I think it will be kind of a mix and match, but I don't have an issue with it. I think it's fine. I think it's very different, very different.
Yeah, I have to say that I was impressed. I was kind of impressed by the little bit of backstory we had on the release today on the character. I thought it was a very strong female character, really strong, quick dialogue, and how it would make sense that character went from something to something else. But of all the people here, I probably may have had the biggest reservation with archetypes, maybe with being burned. I guess in the past being too restricted on classes. But then I have to look at the reveals and information we've gotten so far. Is that I feel like the skill gains and some other options for the community, that they can specialize their choices and create some differences. And as long as my character can be adapted to change how I play it, I think there'll be enough differences created for me to feel like I'm making a change. So instead of choosing skills, changing how I play my character changes the end result of my character. Well, then I think that's enough for me to be excited about specialization. Do you, hey Bill, for each archetype, there's a lot of lore and background. Does anything kind of stand out to you?
I find that sort of interesting too, that they're writing some narrative there to sort of help set the tone for the archetype. But I wonder if it has more to do with gameplay or more to do with like we said, setting up the narrative. So I'm not really sure. I think they're definitely trying to get folks into this idea that the Stoneborn Forge Master is going to, he's a support role, and he's going to be able to you're going to be able to expect certain kinds of abilities from him given what they've written in the narrative. But I don't know if it's going to be a huge, really narrative driven thing. Today's reveal did talk, and they sort of poked fun at, it's like they do have PvE. They said no raids. But so the fact that there's a PvE and they've gone out of their way to say that, and that there's large persistent world masses and everything, I think that's a positive too, because I'm really looking for any game like this. To me, really has to have some meaning in the backstory and everything. So it's hard to tell right now if they're just setting up the hero concept of here's your character that you play, here's your game piece, or if they're really trying to build some kind of individual story for each of them. So,
yeah, I seen the backstory is laying a lot of groundwork that, so far what we've seen, there hasn't been a really strong PvE aspect to the game that they've been showing. They've been talking about the PvP and the worlds and the rule sets and all that stuff. And so having a backstory on the character helps give some lore to the game. But even more importantly, I think what it allows you to do, as per my previous comment about your old RPG days, it allows you as a character to develop your own lore towards your own character. We've seen that they had a space in character creation where they're talking about where you'd have a place to put that type of information about yourself. And roleplay in the MMOs has really been on the decline for a lot of years. So if if their intent is to try and pull that something out, I applaud them. If it just happens to be a byproduct and afterthought, well, let's just make the best of it. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway.
Yeah, but if it is an MMO, so there's a lot. There's going to be many more players alongside each other than there is in obviously Diablo, or you're going to see many characters, and will they all really have the same backstory? And will they all? That's kind of what I'm having a hard time resolving, the way they're written so far.
Point. I think the idea of the fact that we're kind of these eternal gods that live in this persistent world, and I know we'll get into that a little bit more shortly, but we're in this persistent world, and there are these dying worlds, and we're basically going down to conquer, salvage, and get everything we can from those worlds until those worlds are destroyed by a cataclysm, right? So the concept of writing a story in that context is very unique. Typically, in any story where I follow the lore, it's been something to the effect of, okay, I was born a poor child on the streets of Main City in this world, and, my brothers and sisters were here, and it was very different, very different. The little clips they gave us are a nice introduction to the lore. I think it is very nice that we do have some direction as far as what motivates them, what they're all about, that kind of thing. I wouldn't consider myself a lore hound, but lore does matter. And excuse me, I'll give you an example of how lore does matter. For example, I had no intention, for example, with World of Warcraft, I had no intention at all of buying the expansion. I wasn't going to buy Warlords of Draenor. I had told everybody I wasn't buying it. But you know what got me? The story. The lore. When I saw the trailer and I saw Grom and I saw these main characters all interacting, it tugged on me in a place I didn't realize was there, but I liked the story. I liked the lore. And so what I'm hoping is that all of this story will all gel together into a cohesive story of the universe that is compelling. That's my hope. Other than that, I'm not much of a role player or anything like that, but I would like to see that lore expanded so it does create a cohesive story. I know that's something that I really enjoyed about WildStar, and it is something that I very, very much hope that we see in Crowfall, and I'm looking forward to seeing more, for sure.
God, I guess I'm the contrary guy this evening. So first, let me caveat this. If there's any creative directors that are listening, I think you guys are neat. I think first of all, you end up buying a lot of drinks for us when we're out at parties, and you're a little more social than many of the devs. So I like that about you guys. Please don't allow these next few comments to exclude me from being invited in the alpha and betas that may appear in the future. But, for me, lore is what players, they spend their time reading and digging and stuff when they don't want to earn gold and be rich in game. So, it's like I could spend time tabbing through 4 pages of these quest notes, or I could have already killed the 10 things I needed and ran back over here and turned that in and did another quest. So from a completionist standpoint, I don't have the need to be completionist. I just enjoy being rich. I enjoy being the best at my profession, my gathering, or my thing. And usually there's not a lot of lore related to crafting, and there's sure not a lot of lore related to the economy. So if they decide to put that in, maybe that would hook me into reading the fine print in quest bubbles. But till then, probably not.
Expect nothing less.
Hide the money in the lore, and Onris will read it. That's what we got to do.
Oh, God.
Hide the money in the lore, yeah.
Oh, you are too funny, James. You're just too funny. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you where I buried my gold. That's for sure. Let's move on and keep the conversation going about archetypes. So, so far they've showed us that the archetypes kind of run in 3 flavors. And this is going to be a very controversial topic because you have DPS, you have defense, or they did actually say tank on their website in their news release today, and then you have support. And they said each archetype is pretty customizable and you can focus to particular elements that you like to play within a game. But there's not going to be any pure healers. No quote-unquote holy trinity. and this is a hot button topic. What do you guys feel about this?
Well, that is a thing. So I'll be first to admit I've never played a healer as a primary character in any of the games that I've played, so I'm probably totally out of line to talk, but I'm really not a fan of not having that role in an RPG. I happen to feel that the Trinity really represents combat really well, the conditions that would occur. Mostly it's a rules based situation and stats are involved, but it represents the different things that happen in combat, from defense to offense to healing, and I really feel that that really presents three unique playstyles, at least three unique playstyles, and there are players that love it. There are players that love the tank playstyle. There are players that love the healing playstyle. You always hear, and there's talk about how the DPS, there's more DPS than anything, but if you really look at, the typical group makeup of say a 5-man group, it's 60% DPS, 20% tanks, and 20% healers, and I think that's probably about the ratio you have in the game. So everybody says there's no healers or no tanks, but there really is just enough based on the percentage that are required. So I don't know. Obviously, we need to know a lot more about the gameplay of Crowfall before we know what really makes sense for it. But from a sort of a pure perspective, the last game that kind of came out and said no healing, light support, blah blah blah, was Guild Wars 2, and I really, if you look at how combat has really played out in that game, it's really not tactical, it's really not strategic, and even though there may be room for support roles in there, they're not pure, and I don't think they're really prevalent. It feels like everyone's in there for themselves, for the most part, and that has a lot to do with the content design as well. So I don't know. I'd like to hear more about what that'll really mean and see how they play it out. Of course, it's way too early to make a judgment. I think I'll miss healers though a little bit.
Yeah, I think ultimately game mechanics really do need to define the game. So, for example, I'm a big fan of the traditional Trinity. I've defended it multiple times in games. The traditional tank, healer, DPS. It allows people to feel like they have a job. It makes them feel important. They have a role. I've seen games where when you don't have those roles, and everyone kind of is a DPS with self heals, that it turns into basically a bunch of people playing solo. Now, what's interesting here is they did use the word tank, and they did use the word damage dealer. Now that's a little bit different than what I've seen. I've not seen that before. What you have is a class or archetype that is tank. Okay, I'm going to absorb damage, and you've got the damage dealer, right? But then you have support. So to a degree, it's kind of a trinity, but they have strayed away from calling it that. They haven't exactly called it that. And then the more I learn about the game, for example, the game, in this particular case, having a dedicated healer was raising the effective health pool of some of the characters. And now you add concepts like collision. You add concepts like unintended targets of spells and attacks. What happens now in a game if you can have a dedicated healer, okay, in the back of a crowd that's being blocked in by tanks, and he can just stand there, or she can just stand there and cast spell after spell after spell, healing everyone up to full, and nobody can get to that character? Is that strategy, or is that overpowered? And from what the developers were saying, is that kind of gameplay just isn't fun. So what they've done is reduced effective healing and made that third archetype more of a support class overall, which we don't know all the ways it can support. We don't know anything about buffs and debuffs and things like that. But it definitely seems as if they've got a different wrinkle up their sleeve than what I've seen before. This is not the, I like Guild Wars 2, but it's not the Guild Wars 2 system of everybody can do everything, and you just kind of swap roles as we go. The boss is attacking me. I need to get tanky now. It's not like that. This looks to be a whole different type of thing. So to me, I kind of give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm okay with it for now.
Yeah. See, I'm not a huge role guy. I enjoy playing in guilds, and I enjoy playing games that have, large in-game or even large battle contingencies in it. But I'm on 90% of my time is solo play. Now, even if I'm in a party or in a group when we're doing things, I've never been a big roles based guy because I usually choose a character that allows me to play off hours. Because I play a lot of time. When I travel, I never know if the gang I'm hanging with here, are going to be on. So I prefer, huge survivability over roles. And so when we take out the healing aspect, I may be playing tanky just because I have a larger survivability pool for my solo efforts, my sneaking past all of this people doing this huge epic battle so I can go get that damn tree. So I'm really interested to seeing, how does, in past games, I'd play sometimes a healer, but then I'd play as much of a damage dealing healer as I could, just so I wouldn't have to rely on anyone to go do stuff. So Crowfall's kind of got me interested in the concept of, how what does a solo player character look like? Because not every hour of the game is going to be sitting in a group of 40 people trying to accomplish something. So right. I'm interested, slightly concerned, and hoping that the more drops that we learn and the more archetypes we learn, one of them will just read to me like, oh yeah, that's me. That's what I'm gonna do. So,
yeah, good point.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the direction they're going. Honestly, when they said there was no dedicated healers in what was suggested to be truly a PvP-centric game, I was like, heck yeah. Finally, it's not going to be a war of attrition. I've got 5 healers, you've only got 4. We all have about the same amount of DPS, but you're going to win because you got more healers. It supports that whole Zerg mentality. In a PvE game where it's, you're fighting a boss and you're burning down their health with a group of people, healers make sense. It's the way you balance the combat where you kind of need the Holy Trinity. But in a PvP sense, for me, having that healer component, now this is completely disregarding support because I think support still needs to be there, but a pure healer just changes the philosophy of how combat is done in PvP. If you don't have a pure healer, now you have to think about, do I have the right group to go up against those guys over there? Am I going to have enough to get the objective and keep it? Now you have to start planning your combat a little bit better. You have to start deciding which battles to fight and which battles to run from. And I think it's the right direction to go if Crowfall is indeed a PvP-centric game. I did see on their recent post that there is a PvE element to the game. It was on Twitter that they said, no, there is going to be PvE, there's just not going to be any raid bosses. So I think it's going to work, and I think they're going the right direction, definitely. So with that, let's move on. Is there any other archetypes that, we've seen the tank, we've seen the support, and we've seen the DPS. What other archetypes do we think might be out there? Bill?
Well, since they came out of the gate really strong, talking about how there's meaningful crafter and trotted out raft coster and everything, I'm wondering, are we going to see crafting archetypes? Are they at the same tier as all these combat archetypes that we're seeing, or maybe they're at the same tier, but maybe there's a different construct for them. Maybe we'll get to that next. But I'd really like to see that idea, whether or not that defines if you can or can't play a true non-combat role for your entire length of progression. But so that's kind of what I'd like to know is where does the crafters fit into this? Since they're already very important, it seems like we'd get to be featured in a similar way as these archetypes.
Yeah, it would be interesting if they created the James archetype. And, sadly, I don't think there will be one. I would really hope that there would be, but it's kind of been hinted that everybody's going to have to do combat. So I think a pure crafter archetype is not in the works. But I do think because they're saying you're very flexible in your development of your character, that you could forego trying to develop your combat side and focus essentially on your crafting mechanics, which James and I are both pretty privy to doing. I mean, just look at us in WildStar and the silly things that we did. But
Yeah, oh God. No.
So I think there will be the ability for guilds to support a dedicated crafter, but I'm really not hopeful that there'll be a crafter's archetype. What do you think, James?
Well, here's my rant of the day. Well, I can't promise it's my only one, but here's a rant. I say crafting archetype makes sense, and here's the reason why. Crafting archetype is the pet class. I'm tired of pet classes being fancy ranger hunters or just warlocks. God bless America. Why can't crafters create clockwork creatures or golem creatures or whatever? Now I have a crafting class who has an attack pet. So even if myself, I don't have a lot of combat myself, throw a pet class in. Now we have some semblance of crafters being useful in a combat-based role. Not to mention the concept of eventually we build keeps, if we build defensive structures in the realms down below that are facing the hungers, we could then build full-time guards, because I mean, if this is a persistent location and we build this fort, well, not all of our people are going to be on all the time. So maybe if we had crafters that can build clockwork or whatever type creatures, I drop a few in, at least our fort has some semblance of defense as our team rolls away. So I think crafting could be an archetype if they decide to get, if they decide to get kind of creative about it. In my mind, there's absolutely no reason why a crafting archetype couldn't become in place as long as they gave us the ability to be the pet class. So that's a little bit of rant for me right there. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to add is I noticed an interesting one that was mentioned in chat. It was Black Wolf that actually kind of put this in. I think in a question mark behind it, but I think it's interesting. What about a crowd control archetype? What about an archetype that is it's kind of like, it's not really support, it's not really DPS, but more of a crowd controller, or even to kind of expand on that, what if it's an archetype that is kind of the assassin, the one that can poison the enemy, the one can slow the enemy? So not a buffer, but a debuffer to the enemy. What about an archetype that specializes in that? What do you guys think about that?
I like the concept. I really like the concept. I like the ability of a player. If we're gods that come down off the mountain to affect change on these worlds, you could have one who's covered in blood and gore with a big sword running around in the thick of things, and there's not a reason why I can't be sitting on a mountaintop lobbing big bottles of stinky stuff, slowing stuff down the hill on the minions. So I think a crowd control would be interesting. The creativity that I've seen in the previous archetypes, it's a great idea by Black Wolf. I'd be excited at what Crowfall could create if they did.
Well, and I would expand on that, James, because you were talking about clockwork crafting. Well, what about a crowd control where the person makes the poisons and lobs bombs and sets up traps? I mean,
oh, good.
That could be a crafting sub-archetype that does crowd control. I mean, you're building keeps. Somebody's got to build the traps and the pits and capture animals to help fight for you. I mean, there's so many different ways they could take that crowd control and support classes and roll it in if they just get really creative. But how would all of those work in combat? Because you're going to assume that no matter what archetype there is, there's going to be some combat. So let's talk about combat for a little bit, because according to their FAQ, they're going to have an action style that's going to have telegraph systems, player collision, undetected targets with projectiles. Does that mean friendly fire, or does that mean you just won't hit your target? What is it about the action combat? And then you add on the layers of advantages and disadvantages of your character, and how is that all going to play out? For me, action combat is nice in the game for controllers, because WildStar is an action combat. Terra was an action combat. those games seem to me to work a whole lot better if you're playing on a controller. But the problem is with so many different abilities that made it difficult, you know. And I just sometimes action combat made me be paying attention to the ground more than I was paying attention to the combat because am I standing in a cone? Am I gonna have to dodge? And while it made the game feel alive, it also took my eyes away from what I was doing. You know what I'm saying? So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I haven't been a huge fan of action combat in MMOs so far. I mean, not that it's terrible; it's fun. I had a great time in WildStar with the style of combat. I think that was a really good mix of action and rules based combat. Guild Wars 2 to a lesser extent, but pure action combat. I usually play a melee character, and it feels weird and dumb to aim a sword. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't have a lot of fun with that. When I'm in a sword fight in real life, for example, which happens a lot, I usually pick a target and I attack it. I don't just swing stuff and hope I hit things. Maybe there's some collateral damage, sure, but so I guess the idea that in combat, especially in group combat, so this is where this plays in. How do you, if you don't have a target, how do you communicate the condition of that target beyond, say, its health to members of your group? So if you're trying to play, some sort of tactical, a group attack on a given group of players or a boss, how do you know, like, are there going to be abilities like a curse or some type of damage over time where if one of your party members sees that, they can take advantage because they know one of their abilities will do triple damage when a certain kind of dot is on another character. So how are those things, accounted for in action combat if there's no targets? And and if they maybe that just means they can't have those kinds of abilities. I don't know. So there's a few. It's not the twitchiness of it that I don't like. I mean, I like that. I like video games, so I do like doing that stuff. But I just haven't seen an action combat in an MMO really deliver sort of the depth of a sort of tactical team play that I like to see in MMOs.
For me, when I think about real life and holding a sword, and I'm not a swordsman, Bill, so forgive me. I do have a sword. I don't know how to use it. Okay, but when I aim a sword, I wish I could just tab onto a target and let an RNG decide whether or not I hit my target. But to me, I am aiming in just a direction, hoping that I'm aiming accurately enough with my skill to be able to hit my target. So to me, when I think of melee combat, I think of, in real life, if I swing sideways, I'm going to hit everything within that cone, intentional or not intentional. I think of these lightsaber movies of the kid on Christmas picking up the lightsaber and all of a sudden he's swiping the end off the couch and takes off grandma's head and these kind of weird things that you see. But to me, I think if there is a way to, for example, because you're right. If let's say I'm a ranged character and I want to target, maybe I want to call a target on that particular enemy over there. Is there a way to set a telegraph at a distance? That's a good question. From the description of this game, it really sounds like what's in front of you gets hit first. So while I do agree, it does make the game a little less tactical. Because, for example, in the games that I've done group content in the most, it has been a tab target situation where you're now dealing with, which I like. I mean, I like World of Warcraft. I like group combat in World of Warcraft. I've played the game for almost 10 years, so I definitely appreciate that. The way action combat is described, what I'm wondering if we're just not getting the full picture yet, because here we go. We've got some stuff they've kind of only hinted at. For example, the whole unintended target thing. Can we hit our friends? How does that work?
So. I hope so.
Well, see, that's going to add something very interesting to group combat because there's collision as well. which I really haven't played a game with collision since I think it was Warhammer Online. I think had collision, but I haven't really played many games with collision. So that's going to be very interesting. So to me, the action combats work. I think it's fine. I don't have an issue with it. The one thing that I can say can become a disadvantage if there are long combat situations. It can be a little bit fatiguing, constantly having to mash the buttons and constantly having to control everything by action. So it can get a little bit tiresome. I noticed that with WildStar. I did kind of get a little bit tired more quickly. But we'll have to see how it goes. There's so many mysteries with it. But for me, I like the action combat. I don't really have any issues with it.
For me, I don't usually choose my games by playing by combat. I think I stick with games based on combat. So to me, it's just combat's just a means to the ends. If everything else, all the rest of the meta games interest me. If it's more fun, I'll do more combat. I mean, that's just the nature of it. I think for everyone. I'd like to announce now for the game that if I'm not really excited about the combat, I'll probably be a stealth class just so I can sneak around and avoid combat when I want to avoid combat. Wait till Black Wolf is busily involved in something else and just stab him and take his stuff, or sneak by somebody and just steal their nodes and run away. So I don't usually play stealth classes. So again, heads up, Crowfall. If I start announcing that my archetype favorite is stealth classes, someone needs to tell the devs to make the combat maybe more fun. So the fun thing is that what is fun for me in combat may not be fun for everyone. My biggest hope is that they come up with a large or big tent solution that those people who want to be really nuanced and strategic in this large combat type game, it's as fun for them as someone who's out in a 3 or 4 person battle. And that's a challenge to me. I really think that that's going to be tough. How to have 40 people fighting, be enjoying themselves in combat as much as 3 or 4 people, battling it out.
If you play a stealth class, I'm putting padlocks on my pockets.
I'm so thinking of it. I mean, especially with the drop rules and stuff, the gank ability factor here for me just to line my pockets. That's nice. Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Nice.
So there are a few, the one thing I'm also talking about is the combat FAQ states that combat for each archetype will not be balanced. Now, I'll use the air quotes balanced because this is a word that strikes fear in all early communities when talking about combat. So the goal is that no single character will be the best at all situations. And so, guys, what are your thoughts on this whole imbalance between archetypes?
I'll take that one. I think it's brilliant. I'm kind of tired of overbalancing. Matter of fact, I hope the balance is so far off that some classes every class has to run from another class. That's what I want to see. Because there's going to be another class that your class will crush. And in my mind, ultimately that means that you travel as a pack. You bring somebody to fill in the gaps that you don't have, and that promotes social, that promotes team play, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I really hope to see. Obviously, there's got to be sort of a happy medium because some people just won't find some of that fun. I don't know how they will, dial into that. I don't know how any developer can, because some people will just get upset and they leave. But on the other hand, the guys from Artcraft have come out pretty strongly saying this is not the game for everyone. And every day when they release a new update, they'll say, okay, we're going to lose some people today because of this. And so I really think that idea that not every class can do everything and not every class can even possibly win every battle is an important one to bring back some of the more organic, not the force, not through, hey, we're going to queue up in a random dungeon finder and get extra rewards because we decided to do that. This is going to, I think, queue up organic grouping and say, hey, we're going into this place where there's some kind of specific threat, and we need this class or this archetype with us. Will you come? We can't do it with what we have. So I'm hoping for that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the right direction. And I think I want to go a little bit farther than what you were saying. Because party members are going to have strengths and weaknesses, and that's important. But even further, Crowfall has advantages and disadvantages. And so this is going to encourage teamwork and strategic play, just like an old tabletop game. You're going to want to stack your group, your force, to play off those strengths and weaknesses, because not everybody's going to be capable to do everything. I mean, in the old days, you forgot to go to a dungeon with a thief. Well, sorry, you can't get past this trap without brute force, and somebody's going to get hurt more than likely. But let's take it even farther with the advantages and disadvantages that Crowfall has. Now you might look at that centaur and assume he's a tank, but because of his advantages and disadvantages play out, he's not going to be just like the one that's right next to him. And that's going to be quintessential to gameplay, and to where, how could you balance every possible conceivable combination of advantages and disadvantages between the archetypes, the specializations that they do, and then the weaknesses they end up with on their character? It would be an impossible endeavor to even attempt to pretend like there's going to be some kind of balance. And I think that's the perfect way to approach it, because like you were saying, you want to go in as a group. If you go by yourself, 90% of everybody out there is going to own you because you've specialized in a certain way. But those 10% that you are just strong against are going to fear you like no end. As long as everybody has that potential with some percentage of the population, it's brilliant.
I think, kind of piggybacking off of that, I think it's definitely the right way to go. The paper, rock, scissors, where certain classes are stronger against others. I think that's the way to go. I think when you homogenize classes and you make them all balanced against each other in one-on-one situations, every class ends up feeling like they're playing the same. Becomes a boring game. Now, but being that they're right up front saying, hey, listen, this game is not going to be balanced for one-on-one situations, or not balanced for every class to work, basically, there are going to be situations where you're in a fight with an archetype that has a major advantage over you. I am already anticipating the glorious forum posts that we're going to see. They're going to go something like this. I was in the field today, and all I can say is, nerf Legionnaires. Learn how to make your game, Artcraft. And then the next post will go, OMG, learn to play, noob. And then after that, someone's going to try to get the factual. They said they're not all balanced. And then, 3 more people saying, learn to play. And then one other person agreeing with the OP. And then the thread will eventually be locked because somebody's going to insult somebody's mom. That's pretty much the way we're going to see this on the forums. I guarantee it. But in spite of that, again, as I mentioned earlier in the cast, the vision of the game, the elements of the game have to bend to the vision of the game. I think devs can listen to the players too much. I think when you listen to the players too much and you give players everything that they want, I think sometimes you can stray a little bit too far from the game. I think balance continues, as someone said in chat, it needs to be a moving target. I think that you're going to see a constant rush to the flavors of the month, but ultimately, I think this is a very, very wise decision not to try to balance for solo, especially in a PvP centric game. There will be people you can beat, but there'll be other people that it's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern about all the effort of balance is that if there's too much balance, then how will they battle my biggest concern about a PvP-centric game related to, especially how they decide the ongoing dying worlds, is the rolling Zerg. So if everything is too balanced, it almost feel like when Guild Wars 2 jumped out and, there was a rolling pack of 60 people rolling around just capping everything, and then there would be like 2 teams of 5 uncapping everything, and somehow the 10 people still beat the 60 because of objectives and stuff like that. So my hope about the concept of not being balanced but being fair. So a game can be fair and not be balanced. Like you said, if I'm a rogue and I'm not stealthed and I'm just standing there in like light leather or cloth and someone just hits me with a really, really big sword, I died. Now, I have a chance to beat that character based on situations, location, play, my cooldowns, who knows. So a game can still be fair, I think, and not be 100% balanced. So I'm really looking forward to the concept of seeing what their concept of that rolling balance, that movable target, every new release, hell, every new release or change of boons could change downstream greatly the challenges of balance and fairness. As long as the game is fair, I'm really fine with dealing with characters that are more likely to defeat me than less likely.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of fair, there was a good thread in the forums. Since we're talking about combat, brought up about the question about should there be? I'm sorry, I don't have the poster in front of me, but should there be spell reagents and ammunition? Should that be a thing? And will certain classes get off easier because that is or isn't true? A melee character that doesn't have to have magical reagents or arrows. So what do you guys think about that? And this could be a whole show in itself. Do you think that kind of thing is going to fit with what Crowfall is? And do you like that at all? Is there gameplay there, or is it just tedium?
I have to agree with you that I think that's going to be a full show on itself. But to touch on it lightly, I think ammunition and spell reagents do need to be a thing. And I think we can balance that with the melee because we've already talked about items are going to get damaged, items are going to wear out, items are going to break. So the concept would be you balance the quote-unquote cost factor of the melee not having reagents and having to keep them up by how fast they're going to damage their equipment. How quickly can they break their sword? Same thing with if you're a bow. If I'm shooting too many, am I going to break the string on my bow and now I can't use it? So there can be a balance in equipment wear to support also having to have ammunition. But like I said, we need to move off this topic quickly because there's a whole show we could talk about all of that. Yeah. So
yeah, I just want to say that I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of limited
That's because
ammunition.
You're always poor. That's because you're always poor in game. I've never seen a guy put in so much time and be as poor in game as you.
I don't know how it happens. There's holes in my pockets, man. Holes in my pockets. That's all I can say. But I hope that it's not a thing. He's always got a shiny sword. That is true. That is true. I hope it's not a thing, and I'll just leave it there.
I want churn. I want consumables. I want the crafters to have seat at the tables for the game to be successful, for the hunger to be fought back and pushed back. It's built on the back of the crafters, and if ammunition, if your bags have durability issues and you have to buy new bags because you wore out your bags because you're reaching in your bag too much, awesome. I'm 100% fine with that. Moving on because I could rant if we're not careful.
Yeah.
We love the on-res rants. But to keep the topics moving, and I think we need to start getting towards the end of our show today, the last thing we really want to touch on is the world rule sets, because this is a hot button topic. And it's probably going to need its own show too. But, since it was a recent release, we want to touch on it, because we've learned that instead of having different shards or servers with exact copies of the world, Crowfall is going to have unique worlds for each of those shards, and they're going to employ their own rule sets. the different advantages and disadvantages of each of those shards and the way they're set up is a really unique approach to this. And I'm hoping that this is a single server philosophy. We're not going to have all these shards and then we're going to have multiple renditions of this. I'm still going to have a server with all these different worlds. I'm hoping it's a one world situation that's made up of multiple worlds, right? So, what do you guys thought?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I mean, there's nothing else. I mean, conceptually, there's nothing else like this. A lot of people are sort of comparing it to Eve, this idea that you travel from area to area, low sec, high sec, and the danger and reward that comes with that. So it's kind of neat, if, like you say, and I'm getting the impression it's a one universe server, and when you travel to different worlds, that's sort of the, it's that's how they, I guess, tell the story of what you're doing. You're traveling to another world, but it may be actually another server, but you're part of the same game world. That means all manners of players, from casuals to hardcore to economists to whatever, can probably find a slot somewhere in one of these areas of the universe. And if it all ties back together, if you can bring rare materials from the dregs back up to whatever other world that's going to be a really cool gameplay. And so I need to know more because I don't understand it. I don't actually play Eve, so this is all hearsay. But I like the idea, and for a fantasy MMO, I haven't seen anything like it. So I think it's going to be great. And with what we learned about today, I believe it was today, these guys at Artcraft got to stop releasing so many things between podcasts. We're going to have to do daily podcasts. But anyway, it's very interesting how they're going to use the world as progression, as a campaign, which will eventually, end, but your character persistence will continue. So it's really cool, and I need to know more, but I like it.
Yeah, I hope that the persistent world, the permanent worlds, feel permanent. That there does feel kind of like an Asgard. This is kind of the home of the gods, and this is kind of where we go when we're done fighting, and scavenging is kind of where we set up our guild homes and things like that. I do hope that feels permanent, because some people have tried to use the L word. They've tried to call it a lobby game, and it's really not it. I mean, it's in a lobby game, you're kind of sitting in a lobby, right? And once you find a match, it'll create an instance that you and a few others go into. That's not what this is. For those of you listening that haven't seen the post, basically these worlds are all persistent worlds that everybody goes to, and it's not something that just is created when you find a group. It's not like that at all. So now my question on this is, and of course I think people are going to find their preferred worlds to go to, but what's interesting to me is, what about the technical limitations? If, say, there's 5 different servers, and let's say the most popular people in the game saying, "Hey, we're going to go. We are on our way to the infected zone." The infected world, and everybody goes there. Where's the cap? Are there going to be channels? Are there going to be thousands of people there? How is that going to work? I don't know. So I'm very curious about. So to me, my biggest curiosity, outside of all the rule sets and everything else, is technically how are they going to pull this off if everybody decides to go to the same place? So that's really my biggest question I have with it, and we'll have to see how it works out.
I feel like I should take off a shoe and start pounding it on the table. Because I've got questions, and these rule sets only create more questions. Now, at least they give me the ability to make assumptions based on how they've set up these rules. So, because certain rules, like lethality said, you can't carry certain things into certain worlds. Does that mean I can't carry certain ores or certain materials also? So does that mean harvesting on those planets or on those worlds are going to be much more important? Because if I can't take it with you to repair and make you a new sword, I have to build a new sword to be used on that world. So like I put in a chat, imagine all these people showing up naked like, maybe an earlier version of Terminator, not when he got really old and wrinkly. But everyone shows up naked and looking to get the best armor and stuff. So what do I gotta have a storefront on all these worlds, and I have to run out because I can't even take ore in there to build stuff up? Is transportation gonna be a big thing now? I mean, am I gonna have to hire bodyguards because I'm going to the dangerous worlds where I couldn't take anything in? I've got to fill up on bags for really good stuff and then come back to another one. So it's really interesting. I look for more, and I'm hoping that as we get more, we'll start seeing a lot more explosion in the forums for people who are willing to speculate, like what we're doing now, because I really find great interest, and I always get more ideas out of other people's speculation.
Yeah, I think it's a very innovative move that they did with this, and I really see that the way they designed this is really going to make PvP meaningful, because as they explained in the Hunger, as you start out, it's all about getting out there, controlling the resources, holding the hunger back, keeping everything under control, and like James is saying, that transportation between worlds, because if you look at the map in the middle there, you got the drags, you got the shadow, you got these areas that define the rule sets in that area, but you can also see that there's multiple worlds within that ring. So is this suggesting that, there might be a couple of different places to go, a couple of different worlds that you have to interact with, and can you freely move between them during a campaign? Because they're talking about these campaigns might be a week, a month, 6 months, even a year on some of these worlds. Is that campaign affecting all worlds at the same time? Or is there different lengths of campaigns happening on different worlds? And when the Hunger finishes, is that world basically just wiped clean and started over? And it's still the same world? Or does that world actually leave its spot in the quadrant, it implodes, and they make another one in the same ring? So many questions about the potential. We understand the rule sets to a limited degree, but how is all this interaction? If you commit to a campaign, are you stuck in that campaign? There again it goes, is it world specific? Or is it cover the entire everything? So many questions, but I think it's a good move. I think it's a positive direction, But with that, based on what we know of rule sets, what rule set or what world most interests you? What do you think, Mike?
I think God's Reach looks very interesting. The fact that it's kind of designed to be 3 faction space. I think that it could be very epic to have an area that's dedicated to 3 faction, and the fact that they're not permanent. Now, again, we don't know how long they're going to be, and even in the dev post, we kind of talk about, right? Is it 1 week? Is it 1 year? How long do these battles last? We don't know, but the fact that you've got what I've seen in other territorial games is this silly flipping that happens from faction to faction to faction in order to get the scores right. We have to, like in Ion, we had to lose a fortress so that we could retake it to get more points. So because we weren't getting enough points by defending, in this particular case. So to have kind of a stage that resets from time to time, I think this could be very good. But the 3 faction looks really fun. I'm definitely looking to get into some of that.
I have to say that not one really jumped out at me specifically because it's still so gray. I do love how they broke it out where it seems to be, well, this is kind of a good free-for-all world, but this, if factions. So there's factions and then these guilds. And so if it's guilds, does that mean guilds that are in the same faction can fight? So it's like as we move down the schedule, we move up and down the spectrum, does the me versus the we matter more on certain worlds? That really interests me. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but I'm interested from a concept of, which one of those, even though they're not permanent but they're persistent worlds, which one will I make my best money by setting up some sort of shop somewhere?
Yeah, I mean that's it kind of for me too with that thought, but that's why I kind of like the idea if we're making the right assumptions here of the dregs, the rush of getting in there and out of there with something that's desirable or rare or needed in other worlds if that's a mechanic, and then just the adrenaline rush of something mattering. Like I could lose things by trying to do that, so automatically that'll probably eliminate or make at least give pause to everyone from just doing that as a matter of course. And I am not the most skilled player when it comes to that stuff, but I do feed off of the sort of the thrill of victory. And in my case, victory would be surviving a trip to that world, fighting what I had to get what I went there for. And then, so that's what I'm looking to the most. I may die a lot, but it's going to be worth
Yeah, me
it.
too. Yeah.
So, Franklin.
Sorry, I was muted. So for me, God's Reach really jumped out at me as the one that piqued my interest, and mostly because I was a big Dark Age of Camelot player, and the whole concept of 3 faction just takes me back to my 4.5 years of out there fighting for relics. And if that's what they're going for on that world, I'm really intrigued, because the most fun I've ever had at PvP was sieging down keeps and taking down, roaming mobs of players and trying to get that relic over and getting that buff for our PvP. And so when I look at the 3 faction in God's Reach, I'm like, what are they going for there? And then now I think about what they did with the Hunger release. I'm like, there's a lot of potentials there that just really screams, oh, this looks like fun, but without knowing how you move between worlds and all those other questions we already discussed. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how this all plays out. But anyway, I think this is a really good place to tie up today's discussion. We've gone right up to the hour. We've had some really good conversations. We hope that you all like chatting with us. If you want to get with us, you want to follow us, I'll put all our information there in the Twitch chat with all the links. We have our Twitter, Golden Glory PC, and over on Facebook, the Golden Glory Podcast. We have each of our individual Twitter handles. As they say goodnight, they'll tell you what those are.
Yep. Hey, Franklin, we have a website now, too, that we didn't have last week.
Oh,
we have
do have a website.
GoldenGloryPodcast.com is now up and live with
nice.
episodes. So
Fancy.
that is up and running.
Nice. That's excellent. Well, let's go around the room. I am Chief Sarkan. You can find me on Twitter at Chief_Sarkan. It was great having you on the show. We hope to see you on our next one. We'll have lots of them.
Yes. I'm Arrowwolf, and you can follow me on Twitter at Arrowwolf, or on my blog at thewolfden.com, WULFDEN.com.
And I'm Lethality. You can find me at real_lethality on Twitter, 140 characters at a time. And that's it for now, but more coming soon.
Yeah, and I'm Onrez. You can find me on Twitter, Onrez. I'll try to lurk all the Golden Glory sites, Facebook specifically, and definitely try to get some articles and some rant pieces up on the new website, ASAP.
Oh, and don't forget, over at crushtethrone.com, we have an area on their forums. If you want to ask for topics for us to discuss, talk about topics we've already discussed, they've hosted us a nice place to do that chatting.
Yay.
So you don't have to do it just on Twitter. You can head over there and leave us a message.
Yep, very cool. Great set of forums over there. Definitely check those out.
Good vibe, people. Make sure you put your thoughts in there. I'd love to see what you guys are saying.
So anyway, you all have a great night, and we will see you on our next show. You all take care.
See ya.